In our review of news and events in Latin America and the Caribbean this week, we take a look at a referendum in Venezuela, a summit meeting for Mercosur, and further developments in the recent election in Argentina. For all of that, we go to Nicaragua to speak with journalist Stephen Sefton. Stephen?
First, let's start with this referendum in Venezuela.
Okay, well, that referendum was a very important event, both in terms of Venezuela's domestic politics and also to a certain extent in terms of what's going on in the region. In terms of U.S. intervention, the referendum was on the question of whether or not the Venezuelan population support the government of Nicolas Maduro's position over the territorial dispute that Venezuela has with Guyana over an area called Essequibo, which is on the frontier between Venezuela and Guyana. Venezuela is insisting that the dispute be settled via bilateral negotiation, and Guyana, strongly influenced by the money that it's been getting from ExxonMobil, the big oil company that is very interested in the hydrocarbon deposits in the Essequibo region. Guyana is trying to take Venezuela to the International Court of Justice and thus violate an agreement from 1966 in which they committed to a bilateral negotiated settlement. So the vote involved just over 50% of the people entitled to vote on Venezuela's electoral roll, and the vote in favor of the government's position was around 95%. So an overwhelming result for Nicolas Maduro, ratifying his decision to go ahead and insist on bilateral negotiations with Guyana. And at the same time, it's important to point out that Venezuela has decided to take certain measures treating the disputed area as if it were sovereign territory of Venezuela, and that is in response to Guyana's completely illegal decisions to assign concessions for oil and gas exploitation to foreign oil companies, especially ExxonMobil, in clear violation of both of international law and of standing agreements that they had with Venezuela.
Going into the election next year, knowing that you have 90% of the people who voted standing behind you, it gives you a decent amount of leverage to go in and play hardball, and it looks like that's what's intended.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a very important result in terms of Venezuela's domestic politics, because it, as you say, it puts Nicolas Maduro in a very strong position of having the support of people on an absolutely key domestic issue and a regionally important issue for the Venezuelan people.
Yep, and then, of course, with Venezuela having, further protection, basically, of its sovereignty as against the United States by strengthening the position of the ruling government, and then having that government in a position to push back against the U.S. attempt to grab the oil that belongs to Venezuela and that is being claimed by Guyana. That has more than just local implications or national implications in Venezuela, but the whole region and really the whole global geopolitical.
Oh yeah, absolutely, Don. I think you're right. You're absolutely right to insist on that, because what's happening in that dispute is just yet one more example of United States and European, in fact, intervention in the region. In an effort to prevent the region's development, to prevent the region's integration for the benefit of the populations of the countries in the region, in order to loot the region of its natural resources and maintain the region under the foreign policy dominance of the United States and to a lesser extent Europe. And we can see that in so many contexts. The foreign ministers of the Mercosur countries, which are Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay and Uruguay, and also now Bolivia. Bolivia is now a full member of Mercosur after having been an associate member for many years. And of course, there are also observer countries taking part in the meeting. And why is that important? Because in regional terms, it's important, in particular since 2019, from the signing of an agreement of association between the European Union and the Mercosur countries. And there's been a dispute among the Mercosur countries themselves about whether or not to sign up to that agreement, which is not necessarily a favourable agreement from the point of view, in particular, of the farming sectors of the Mercosur region. And also, it has to be said that countries like France and Belgium also view the agreement with some reluctance and have serious reservations about it for precisely the same issue of the farming sectors in their respective countries. So from that point of view, the meeting's important because the Argentinian government has said explicitly that they reject the agreement. Brazil has reservations about it. Paraguay and Uruguay seem to think that it's an acceptable agreement. I'm not clear about the position of Bolivia on that agreement, but I'd be very surprised if Bolivia were in favor of the agreement as it stands, because it does affect their agricultural production sector. Now, the Argentinian government leaves office in a matter of days. On December the 10th, this Sunday, Javier Milei, the extreme right-wing libertarian elected president who won the recent presidential elections in Argentina, takes office. And his foreign minister has said a couple of things that are extremely important from Mercosur's point of view, and more particularly Brazil's point of view, because Diana Mondi, I think her name is designated foreign minister for the incoming Milei administration. And she said two things. She says that Argentina accepts or will accept this agreement of association with the European Union as it stands, which is the direct opposite of what the outgoing government is saying. And also she said that, contrary also to what Milei's position in his electoral campaign, what Milei has done is, in his electoral campaign, he said he rejected joining the BRICS countries, of which Brazil is a founding member. Then they seem to change their mind prior to Milei's visit to the United States. Milei then visited the United States, had high-level talks there in Washington, and subsequently said that they weren't sure. They weren't sure whether they joined. But after the visit to the United States, Mondi said they would definitely not join the BRICS. So there you have two positions that are very relevant for their relationship with Brazil. Now, Brazil's President Lula da Silva has said that he's not going to attend the inauguration on December the 10th of Javier Milei. But Javier Milei has invited the previous extreme right-wing president of Brazil, under whose administration Lula was imprisoned. And apparently Jair Bolsonaro is going to bring with him a delegation of around 50 people, which is the kind of delegation you'd expect from the representative of a government. What does all this indicate? It's just more confirmation of United States meddling and intervention in the region, and the results that have come about that are likely to impede the region's moves towards regional integration. And also, in the case of Argentina's refusal to join the BRICS, the integration of the region into the developing multicentric order of international relations being promoted by China and the Russian Federation.
And the rest of the BRICS. Stephen, these are some very interesting things afoot. We're going to track them as they develop, and appreciate your time.
Thank you, Don. I look forward to talking to you again. Maybe we can follow this up in future conversations.
Sure.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.